for me? Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please take your seats. The program will begin momentarily.
If I could ask you all to please take your seats so we can begin. Could I ask you all please to take your seats? Could everyone please take your seats? If I could ask everyone to please take their seats so we can get started. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Green. As former chairman of the Georgia Ports Authority and the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and a proud Georgia member of the United States Global Leadership Coalition, I'm honored to welcome you here today and thank you for being with us. Among the many friendly faces I see today, we have a number of elected officials and some special guests, and if you'd hold your applause until I finish recognizing all of them, I appreciate it. First, we have Representative Jack Kingston, Representative Paul Brown, and from the office of Senator Chambliss, Representative Graves, Representative Doug Collins, Representative David Scott, Robert Woodall, Phil Gingrey, John Lewis, and Representative Tom Price. Please join me in thanking them for being with us. This afternoon, we look forward to a stimulating discussion about America's role in the world. Think about recent headlines: the growing threat in Iraq and Syria from ISIS, the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa, and the growing tensions in Ukraine. These headlines explain why America must maintain a strong role in the world. In Georgia, the United States Global Leadership Coalition has assembled a distinguished group of leaders, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, who all believe that America must be a global leader, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Einstein once said, "Peace cannot be kept by force alone. It can only be achieved by understanding." In South Georgia, we'd say it's a thin piece of ham that don't have two sides. As a member of the USGLC's global leadership, Georgia leadership, I'm proud to stand with the coalition in its efforts to advance strong and effective international programs. Today, we have a unique opportunity to hear from two distinguished experts on how America's small investment in diplomatic and development programs help to build a strong economy, fight terrorism, support allies, and create stability around the world. Our special guests today are Senator Johnny Isakson and General George Casey. Senator Isakson, we thank you for your dedication to these principles throughout your career. And likewise, General Casey, we thank you for your service to our country and your dedication to these same ideals. And we look forward to your comments. And now, to educate you more on the coalition and its work around the country, please join me in welcoming Chairman Emeritus George Ingram.
Thank you, Steve. It's a great honor to be here today, and a special privilege to hear from Senator Johnny Isakson and General George Casey. I would like to thank our partners for this event: USGLC board members Coca-Cola and CARE, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Metro Atlantic Chamber, and the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. I would also like to acknowledge our tremendous Georgia Advisory Committee members, and without whose participation we would not be here today, and who we would not be properly represented in Georgia. Who are we? The U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, frequently known as the Strange Bedfellows Alliance, brings together a diverse range of voices: over 400 businesses, faith-based leaders, and humanitarian organizations, from CARE to Coca-Cola, from Walmart to World Vision. Our National Bipartisan Advisory Council, led by General Colin Powell, is a who's who of U.S. national security and foreign policy community, including every living Secretary of State, from Henry Kissinger to Hillary Clinton. We are particularly proud of our growing voice among the military. Our National Security Advisory Council is comprised of 150 generals and admirals. And our Veterans for Smart Power is 30,000 vets across the country who are lending their support for development and diplomacy. What brings us together is a belief in the importance of America's global leadership, the belief that America's leadership is in our interest, and that we need a range of tools to advance them. The core tool is the International Affairs Budget Account. At only 1% of the federal budget, it is a small but strategic investment. It funds programs such as the Peace Corps, diplomacy, business development, agriculture, and health. Just think of what we're doing on Ebola today. In today's chaotic world, it is important that we use all of the tools in our toolbox, development and diplomacy alongside of defense, to keep us safe, to advance our economic interest, and to demonstrate our values. I know that you here in Georgia understand this. The question we want to explore is, what is America's role in today's interconnected, interdependent world? At a time of great economic and national security challenges, why does America's leadership in the world matter to Georgia? I believe the stakes are just too high to diminish America's role. Not just because it's the right thing to do, and it is, but it's also the smart thing to do. Certainly the tragic events in Syria, Ukraine, Iraq, bring to us stark reality the interconnectedness of our security and our humanitarian interests, along with our economic future. Thank you for joining me here today and on being part of our journey to build a better, safer, more prosperous world. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Jay Madden of Peachtree Presbyterian Church.
Well, our church began 105 years ago as an outreach to vulnerable children in the Atlanta community and continue today to have that passion for vulnerable kids around the world and investing in the next generation. And we support programs to educate young people in Malawi and restore victims of human trafficking in India and are currently involved in the Ebola crisis. So we have a real passion to serve our world. And I have firsthand experience in that I have seen the impact of U.S. development programs around the world. In fact, our largest project in Malawi began as a USAID program. So I'm really passionate about the work that the U.S. government can do to work alongside faith-based organizations to make a difference and transform our world and believe it offers what America does best. So before we have our lunch, would you join me as I bless our meal? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to come together in freedom. We believe that everyone in this world is created in your image and should be able to live in such a way that they can become the people that you created them to be. Father, you have blessed each of us in this room, and you have given us opportunities to be a blessing in this world. No matter our vocation, our primary responsibility is to love you and our neighbor. So Lord, inspire us to use what you have given us for the greater good. And in a time of great unrest, we pray for our nation and its leaders. We ask that you would give them wisdom and courage. We pray that their decisions will reflect your compassion and justice in this world. So now, Lord, we thank you for this meal and ask that you would bless our conversations. Amen. Please enjoy your lunch.
Okay, if I can have your attention. I don't know how to whistle, but if there's anyone here who does, have at it. Thank you very much. There we go, thank you. I always wanted to learn how to do that. I missed out on that. Well, I want to welcome all of you here. I'm Clyde Tuggle, and I'm honored to be here representing the Coca-Cola Company. When asked what I do for Coca-Cola, it's very simple. I'm a Coca-Cola salesman. Today is the last day of the quarter, and so I encourage you all to get out and purchase a 12-pack of Coke. And I'm honored, obviously, to share the stage with really an extraordinary group of government, business, and community leaders. And I want to thank USGLC for asking me to be a part of today's program. As I look around the room, this is, and I was saying this to General Casey before lunch, it is an impressive gathering of this city and this state's business leadership, government leadership, and active participants in the community. Obviously, I want to recognize our distinguished guest, Senator Johnny Isakson, General George Casey. General Casey, I've had the privilege of getting to know in the past and has participated in helping do some leadership development at Coca-Cola, and obviously our own Dr. Helene Gayle. These three can give us some truly invaluable perspective on how our nation and state benefit from investments in overseas development. I would also like to echo Steve's recognition. We have a number of important people who are representing our state, from the state legislature, members of Congress, Representative Kingston, Representative Brown, great to have you here, our Attorney General Sam Olens. And I do want to just take a second to say a word about Johnny Isakson, and it is this. We are so proud to have this gentleman, and I underscore that term, as our United States Senator. We live in a time where there is division and discourse in our Congress, and everywhere I go, I hear nothing but great things about our senator. Recently, I was with a couple of Democratic senators, Senator Landrieu from Louisiana, Senator Heitkamp from North Dakota, both Democrats, and it was amazing to hear them say that we are so lucky to have Johnny Isakson representing this state and in Congress. And when I think about his ability to bridge the political divide, to bring mature, thoughtful, public policy-minded thinking to the national debate and to national public policy, again, I think we should just take a second and recognize you and thank you, Johnny. I would also, before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the men and women here today who have sacrificed so much to serve our nation and defend our values and our way of life. They deserve richly our appreciation and our support. And so I'd like to ask all veterans and active duty service men and women to please rise so we can salute you and thank you. Words cannot express how much we thank you for all you've done to protect our great country and advance the cause of freedom here and around the world. Now, born in 1886, Coca-Cola is today a truly global business. We've seen firsthand how important it is to have systems and policies that allow us to not just refresh the world, but to invest in overseas markets of all kinds, and in the process to strengthen the communities we proudly serve. America's development and diplomatic programs funded by U.S. international affairs budget have helped us do all these things while delivering real economic returns for Georgia. So consider a couple of facts. Today, trade supports more than 22% of the jobs in our great state. Georgia exported more than $35 billion in goods and services last year, and over 89% of Georgia's exporting companies are small or medium-sized businesses. International affairs spending helps build our economy here at home and create shared prosperity abroad. At Coca-Cola, we know our business can only be as strong as the communities we proudly serve. And that's why we partnered with government and civil society to bring to life innovative solutions to some of the world's great development challenges. For example, 800 million people lack access to safe drinking water, and nearly 1.4 million children die each year as a result. 50% of the hospital beds around the world are occupied by people who are there because of waterborne disease. With the Inter-American Development Bank, an agency funded by U.S. International Affairs budget, we're working to address this challenge. So, as an example, we have created an off-the-grid, entrepreneur-operated kiosk designed to offer safe, purified drinking water. These kiosks, which we call eco-centers, will deliver 500 million liters of safe drinking water by 2015, creating jobs in communities in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Now, partnerships like this can make a real difference in the lives of people worldwide, and they support and create jobs in this country and in this state. But don't take my word for it. Here are some insightful experts who know just how important development and diplomacy can be. If we can have a quick look at the video, please.
With our economy the way it is today, some people are asking why we're spending so much money overseas and not on creating jobs right here at home. Well, actually, we're not spending much money. Just 1% of our national budget goes to the international affairs budget. That's not a lot. And helping create American jobs is just what that money's doing. If you want to create jobs, you have to create more demand for products and services. You need more customers. And where are American companies finding more customers? Not here, but here. And here. And here. 95% of the world's customers live outside the U.S. 95%? When we sell goods to them, they're called exports. U.S. exports accounted for a big part of our economic growth last year. Half went to developing countries. And their economies are growing 3 times faster than developed countries. And every 10% increase in exports equals a 7% increase in jobs here. So, how do we increase exports? Build new markets for American goods and services. Remember that 1%? America's international affairs budget helps fund programs that improve health and education, supports agriculture development, builds a stable economy, and creates new markets. So if we don't go to the biggest, fastest growing group of consumers, other countries will. Other countries already are. Investing a small amount in global development and diplomacy is not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. To make our economy stronger. To create more jobs. For my mom, for my dad, for my neighbor, for me.
Clearly, some great ideas there. My boss and our chairman and CEO, Muhtar Kent, often says that with 99% of the population living outside the United States, when 99% of our earnings comes from outside the United States, we'll just be getting started. So we have a long way to go. Now for the NGO side of things, I'm pleased to introduce a world-renowned expert on health, global development, and humanitarian issues, a leader who also serves on the Coca-Cola Company's board of directors. I will hope you will join me in welcoming the president and CEO of CARE USA, Dr. Helene Gayle.
Thanks so much, Clyde. Good afternoon, everybody. That video was fabulous. Those young children, I think, really put together what USGLC is all about and the message that I think we all hope that we can get to the American people about why it matters so much to invest that small amount that we do invest and to make sure that there is not an erosion of those resources. So it's why I love USGLC. I'm here today very proud not only to be a member of the Georgia Advisory Committee, but also a national board member of USGLC. And I'm also here very much proud of the fact that I'm the president and CEO of CARE and representing CARE here today. And to my colleagues who are here, we just think I rely so much on the wonderful things that our staff do to make a difference in the world, and you do it so well and make all of us so proud. Let me say a few words about CARE, just to put in perspective what we do. For nearly 7 decades, CARE has been making an impact on the lives of millions and millions of people around the globe. Some people know CARE as a food relief organization because that's, after all, how we got our start in 1945, sending the first ever CARE package as part of the effort to rebuild war-torn Europe after World War II. Now, over time, CARE has gone from meeting people's basic needs, like food, to creating long-lasting change and building healthy and resilient communities. Today, we have a vast reach, and our work is very diverse. But our mission is simple. It's to fight and eventually end extreme poverty and social injustice worldwide. In our work, we place a particular focus on empowering girls and women for 2 reasons. First of all, because girls and women are disproportionately burdened by poverty. If you look at any of the statistics, whether it's education or health or access to economic opportunity, girls and women bear the brunt of it. But the flip side of that is that when girls and women are equipped with the resources they need, they have the power not only to lift themselves out of poverty, but also to have catalytic change for families, communities, and ultimately, it's how we're going to change our world by having better balance and making sure that that 50% of the world that has been left out of reaching their potential has that opportunity. I think that's the way we build smart, equal, strong, and prosperous communities. Last year, CARE worked in 87 countries. We supported almost 1,000 poverty-fighting and humanitarian aid projects and directly reached almost 100 million people. And these programs don't just help people now. They deliver lasting change and equip them with tools that they need to overcome challenges for the rest of their lives. Much of CARE's success has been achieved through partnering with the U.S. government. Whether it's fighting hunger, improving access to education or health services, empowering girls and women, fighting gender-based violence, or advocating for justice, we're proud to be part of that small but mighty 1% of the federal spending known as America's international affairs budget. So, it is my honor to introduce one of the greatest champions for those resources. I could just say ditto to everything that Clyde said about Senator Isakson, but let me say a few more things. It is a privilege to introduce Senator Johnny Isakson, a tremendous champion on behalf of U.S. global engagement and a real force for results. His expertise and commitment to U.S. development programs is truly, truly inspiring. And today's conversation about America's global leadership and its impact on Georgia is one that could not take place without the senator. I've had the opportunity to travel with Senator Isakson along with Jack Kingston and really see the kind of true commitment and passion he has for these issues. Now, Senator Isakson was elected to the Senate in 2014 after serving 3 terms in the House of Representatives. When Senator Isakson came to the Senate, he joined the Foreign Relations Committee. By his own admission, it wasn't a seat that he necessarily sought out, but fate can be a funny thing. Senator Isakson used his post on foreign relations to take a leadership role on a number of issues, particularly those related to Africa, which he has called the continent of the 21st century, after visiting countries including Uganda, Tanzania, North and South Sudan. He served as the ranking member of the African Subcommittee, where he focused on global health, international investment and trade, and a host of other issues. He can articulate better than anyone else why U.S. foreign assistance comes back to help the U.S. economy, which you'll hear about in a moment. Senator, on behalf of the business, development, faith-based, and veterans community that you see represented here today, we thank you for your outstanding support and leadership. And I think we're going to have lots of time also to continue to acknowledge the important role that you played. After his remarks, the Senator will be joined by General George Casey for a discussion on America's global leadership and its impact on Georgia. So let me give an introduction as well to General Casey. General George Casey is an experienced leader who dedicated over 4 decades to serving his country in uniform. The general has held many important leadership positions throughout his career in the U.S. Army, culminating in his post as the 36th Chief of the Staff of the U.S. Army. During his 4 years as the Chief of Staff, General Casey transformed the Army to be able to meet the challenges of the 21st century brought about by a constantly changing global environment. He is also a member of USGLC's National Security Advisory Council. General, we are so honored that you are joining us here today. We thank you for your service to our country and look forward to hearing your insights. And my last duty before I sit down is to introduce our distinguished moderator, Richard Warner, founder and CEO of What's Up Interactive. A media and marketing expert, Richard has moderated events for prominent organizations across the state of Georgia, and we are so pleased to have him with us. We are so honored to have all of these distinguished experts with us today, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. But first, please join me in welcoming a true leader and advocate for using all the tools of U.S. power, Senator Johnny Isakson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, you should be very careful. It may be a lousy speech. But I'm going to talk about my favorite subject today. Helene, thank you for your generous and kind introduction, and thank you for sharing with me the work of CARE in Tanzania and Uganda and many other places we've traveled together. I'm grateful to you, and I'm so proud CARE USA is located in Atlanta, Georgia. You do wonderful work. General Casey, it's an honor and a privilege to serve with you. I first met you when you were in Saddam Hussein's palace, where you were coordinating our joint forces in Iraq in 2005 through 2007. You did a wonderful job for our country, and we're all indebted to you for your great service to America. I'm great to be with, give him a round of applause. My two colleagues from the Congress of the United States, Paul Brown from the House and Jack Kingston from the House, it's an honor to be with you. Jack and I share a passion for Africa. We've traveled together with Helene to Uganda. We love that continent very much, and I'm glad Helene said what she did in the introduction, because it is the continent of the 21st century for the United States of America. Clyde Tuggle, I'm buying 2 six-packs tonight because of all the nice things you said about me. But Coca-Cola is not going to grow. They're not going to expand market share unless it's overseas and around the world. In fact, America is a maturing economy in almost all sectors. And for us to grow our businesses, we have to reach beyond our own borders. We cannot be isolationists. We must be internationalists in our reach. I am a representative in the United States Congress and the United States Senate who believes in a strong military. I believe in peace through strength. But I know you only sustain peace with good. Strength will get you the peace originally, but it's good soft power that keeps the peace. And keeping the peace is what we want all about. I'm going to give you a series of stories today that hopefully will illustrate for you the points I want to make in my remarks. But it's critically important for us to understand we must have a strong military force to have respect, not fear, but respect. ISIS wants you to fear them. They want you to cower in your house and just not come outside. They want to destroy what you believe in because you fear for your life. They want a power that's strong and evil. We want a power that's strong and good. My favorite story, General Casey, about you and your service and your soldiers that I worked with in Iraq in 2005 is this story. I went with a rifle squad in Gazaria just as the awakening was beginning. We walked the street of Gazaria with a United States captain and his squad, handing out microloans to Iraqis who had just had a terrible battle fought where we drove Al-Qaeda out of Gazaria. And I sat there thinking to myself, where else in the history of mankind has a military so powerful and so strong gone to come to the aid of people who were oppressed and liberate them with military power and strength, and then while the gun power is still in the air, to walk down the street handing out microloans to the bakeries and the butcher shops and the repair shops and the mosque in that village. It just doesn't happen many places. We live in the greatest country on the face of this earth. You don't ever try to find anybody trying to break out of the United States of America. They're all trying to break in. And for a very good reason. We are the bastion of peace. We are the bastion of hope. We are what all the future of the world really depends on and rests on, is our belief in individual dignity, the strength of our country, and the strength of our belief in the power of freedom and liberty for all. Now, let me tell you something. As an economic power, foreign assistance is critical to grow our economies, but it's also critical to lessen the pressure for the cost of the military and uplift our power as a country. We have a great competitor right now known as China. China understands what we know. There are two great motivators in the world, fear and reward. China believes right now in reward, and we believe in reward, but their belief is different. They're handing out as many yen, as many dollars, and as many of their money as they can in Africa. But you know what they do? They build stadiums, they build roads, they build schools, but they build them with Chinese labor. The United States of America goes to Africa to solve its problems, but through African people. We provide the capital and the intelligence and the resources, but the African people help us deliver. So we're uplifting their lives while we're also saving their lives. I know we've got a gentleman here from Nairobi, Kenya, and it prompted me when I met him earlier to include one story in my remarks about my first visit to Nairobi and Kibera, which is the largest slum in the world. I also went to a Catholic relief center known as New Abani on the mountain above Kenya. I went and met with Sister Mary, who started her orphanage years ago when every baby born to a mother infected with AIDS died by the age of 5. In fact, New Abani was a center with a huge cemetery where the 5-year-olds had been buried who died because they were born to a mother infected with AIDS. But when I visited, I saw a cemetery that was flanked by 2 dormitories where children 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old were going to school. They also had been born to mothers infected with HIV/AIDS. But because of the antiretrovirals and the PEPFAR program of the President of the United States, President George Bush, extended by Barack Obama, now if you're born to a mother infected with HIV who's on her antiretrovirals, you live a normal, healthy life. That's the greatness of America. That's the soft power that we all believe in. Clyde, when you were talking about your water projects, I had the pleasure of going 60 miles north of Accra, Ghana, about 5 years ago to dedicate one of the first Coca-Cola water projects in the country of Ghana. I went to a village where the chief and his wife welcomed me. Went there with Senator Coons from Delaware. They had a stage for us to sit on. They had Coca-Cola cups up on that stage. I didn't know what they were for because there was nothing in them. They showed me this beautiful package plant and the ultraviolet lights that were taking the worst, nastiest water you have ever seen in your life, and in a matter of 24 hours converting into potable, clean water. And they showed me how the whole plant worked, and then they took one of those Coca-Cola cups and they put it at the bottom of the effluent outfall, and they opened it up and filled it up with that water. The water I had seen just a few minutes earlier in that terrible, nasty river that went into that protection plant. And I said, Lord, please help me. If I live through this one, I'll be a good boy the rest of my life. And I took that Coca-Cola cup full of water and I drank 3 swallows. And you know what? It was as good a glass of water as I've ever had. I never got sick. And I realized in the eyes of those villagers the promise of the Coca-Cola Company and what they had brought to that village. That's American soft power in action. And I hope they buy a lot of Coca-Colas with good potable water that they've used in that village. But you know what else is so good about it? We teach sustainability as well as we teach good habits. Coca-Cola doesn't just give them a package plant. They sell them for 7 cents a day, 5 gallons of water. Because 7 cents a day for 5 gallons of water is a sustainable revenue source for them to turn that purification plant over to the village and for the village to operate it. We want them not to just drink for a day, we want them to drink for a lifetime. America is all about the biblical admonition of give a man a fish for a day and you'll solve his hunger for one day, but teach him to fish and you'll solve his hunger for a lifetime. I am very pleased to have just introduced, along with Mike Johans, Bob Casey, and Senator Coons and others in the Senate, Senate Bill 2909, which is the Food for the Future program, where we authorize the funding of Food for the Future. Now, Food for the Future is the following premise. Instead of sending USA and dropping bags of food over in Somalia to the Somali people, why not teach them to grow their own food and live a lifetime? So Food for the Future is all about making Africa and developing countries around the world not just sustainable because you feed them for a day, but sustainable for a lifetime because you teach them how to farm. In fact, in Georgia today, we have a great company known as Manna. In fact, I think Manna's director is probably here somewhere in the audience. Manna's from the little farm town I worked a farm on when I was growing up as a little boy called Fitzgerald in Ben Hill County. Manna takes Georgia's greatest product, peanuts, makes it into fortified peanut butter paste, and then fortifies it with powdered milk and with vitamins into 3.5-ounce heat seal packages. And you know where they go? They go to Somalia. And 3 of those packages a day, one for breakfast, one for lunch, and one for dinner, will end malnutrition, will feed people and keep a famine from taking place. And there are tens of thousands of Somalis who walk the earth today because of Manna in Fitzgerald, Georgia, have avoided dying of malnutrition instead of living a normal life. That's the kind of America I believe in. That's the kind of America I love, and that's the kind of America we all need to fight for. You'll hear people complain about foreign assistance, saying we send too much money overseas. It's not 1% of our budget, it's about 0.9% of our budget. And it goes to a lot of countries that some people say, oh, I don't think we ought to be giving Egypt any money. Well, let me tell you about Egypt. There's a place called the Philadelphia Corridor south of Gaza, which in the Camp David Accords, Egypt agreed, in a 3-party agreement with the United States and Israel, they agreed to protect the south part of Gaza from being tunneled and from missiles being delivered in as long as the United States would believe to give them foreign aid. Did we rent their military? Sure. Did we rent their influence? Sure. Has it worked? It's worked for 35 years. It's right because it's a partnership based on peace through protecting each other and the United States being a participant in that. That's what it's all about. So sometimes when you hear about money going to a place, you just don't think, well, maybe it's not just right that it's going there. Maybe there are a lot of good reasons why it's going there. A lot of people complain about the $3.5 billion we send to Israel. Let me tell you something. $3.5 billion is a small price to pay for an ally in a very dangerous part of the world. And $2 billion of those dollars comes back to the United States of America in the purchase from Lockheed Martin and others of military equipment and intelligence material. And $1.5 billion in terms of supplies for their soldiers and their troops. That's the kind of partnership you want. We don't want to go build $3.5 billion bases in the Middle East when we can have $3.5 billion friends in the Middle East. That's what use soft power is all about, but that's what foreign assistance appropriations is also all about. Now, we're fighting a very dangerous war right now against the ultimate war between good and evil. And I've said this when 9/11 took place, and I think this is the final battle of that. We've got to seek out ISIS and destroy it. And once we do, we've got to give to the people who have been hurt by ISIS and destroyed by ISIS and intimidated by ISIS and threatened by ISIS the same peace and the same redevelopment that we gave the Japanese, that we gave the Germans, and that we gave the South Koreans. Because after we defeat them, we're going to have to give them the soft power of the United States of America. America doesn't bomb and leave. America stays and builds. And that's the difference in us and any other nation on the face of this earth. It's a privilege for me to be here today. I'm honored that so many of you came out to learn about our global reach and the potential for our country, for our economy, and for peace and stability in the world. And it's an honor for me to serve you in the greatest body in the world, the United States Senate. Thank you very much.
You're the best.
General, good to see you.
Thanks, Richard.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. General Casey and Senator Isaacson, it's an honor to be on stage with you. We're going to go until about 1:25. A couple of housekeeping notes as we get into this Q&A session. The first one is that you'll see some index cards on your table. If you have a question or a comment for Senator Isaacson, for General Casey, please write those down, and Billy or Emily or somebody from USGLC will be around to collect those cards and bring them up to us to talk about. Please mute your cell phones, but you don't have to turn them off. If you're a tweeter, you can tweet to Impact on Georgia, and you can see the feed that's going on both sides of the stage as people make comments. We have come through the worst recession since the 1930s, and it's a weak recovery. Certainly there's a lot of pressure on government spending to cut it, or at least be very wise in how we do it. To what extent is that 1% impacted by the current economic environment?
Well, I tell everybody, I'm a member of the Finance Committee where we've been thinking about, and I underline thinking about, reforming the U.S. tax code for C Corps and S Corps alike. But I tell them on that the same thing I tell them on budgetary matters. In the United States of America, it's time that we put everything on the table, and I do mean everything. And then we kept everything based on a cost-benefit analysis. Now, who in here right now would like to underfund the CDC? There are a lot of people that question funding the CDC when we built it. A lot of people question the $1,250,000,000 that Mr. Jacobs here, who's here, and Oz Nelson and others in the audience helped to raise through the United States Congress to build the laboratories that exist out on Clifton Road right now. Think what would have happened in America or in the world with an Ebola outbreak without those laboratories and that institution out there. So you measure everything on a cost-benefit basis. And what's the benefit of having a CDC? What's the benefit of having this or that? And then you take off the table those things that don't justify the expenditure or justify the tax. That's the way you do it. And if you do that, and hopefully I did an adequate enough job in the stories I gave you about foreign assistance to recognize that is a small price to pay for the freedom, the peace, and the expansion of our marketplaces around the world. So judge it on a cost-benefit analysis.
If we knew what you know, having spent all that time in senior military leadership in Iraq and Afghanistan, how would our perspective be different? What did you learn that you had to be in that position to learn?
Well, you see, first of all, it's wonderful to be here with you all and to share the stage with these two distinguished gentlemen. What I saw is that it started before Iraq, went before my time in Iraq. But really, since September 11th, the international security environment and the threats to the United States have changed fundamentally. And for me as an Army officer, I like to say that I spent the first 30 years of a 40-year career training to fight a war I never fought, and the last 10 learning to fight a different war while I was fighting it. And since the threats have changed, the way we deal with those threats have changed, and those threats will not be addressed or resolved through military means alone. And Senator Isaacson's story about walking through Baghdad and passing out aid money, I saw the value of direct aid, direct economic aid to sustaining our military gains in Iraq and in Afghanistan time after time. And a lot of people ask, what are the generals and doing out here advocating for the foreign aid budget? And it's because we've seen the impact of that budget and the effect of that budget on the ground in Iraq, Afghanistan, and for me, Bosnia and Kosovo.
In doing questioning with some folks in the audience before the event, one comment was made that, well, you know, really all I understand is force. I presume that's not a well-guided opinion.
No, I don't think it's a well-guided opinion. In fact, they love an environment of peace, and they love people who will provide peace, and they love force if it gives them the security of living in a peaceful world. But let me tell you, talking about Helene mentioned Africa, let me tell you a little story about Rwanda. And talking about peace for a second. As you know, they went through the worst genocide probably in the history of mankind other than the Holocaust during the Clinton administration, when a million Africans were killed in this genocide of Rwanda. But President Kagame, who's still the president today, came down out of the mountains and liberated the people of Rwanda and taught them peace rather than war, and taught them peace and harmony working together. And today Rwanda is one of the great friends of the United States of America. And one of the reasons they are is we have helped them through PEPFAR, through food aid, through teaching them and having intellectual exchanges with the university. We have taught them what the benefits of peace are and the benefits of investment in the institutions that you need in the country to make it thrive and grow. So I think that foreign assistance helps set the platform and the template for peace and security. You need the respect of what a military could do, but you need the sustainment of what sustainability will give you.
And if I could, I'd just follow on that, exactly what the senator said. Time and again, we would go in and conduct military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan to clear the bad guys away. And we would immediately follow up with economic assistance so people could see the positive benefit of supporting the government. But we couldn't sustain our military gains without political and economic support.
Do we have the channels, once we've cleared away the military leading presence in an area, do we have the channels, diplomatic channels, financial channels, to be able to go in to war-torn areas, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to do good?
I think we absolutely do, but you said take the military away. There's got to be a secure enough environment for the aid workers to go in there and provide the aid. But between what we do, the agencies of our own government, the non-governmental organizations and partnerships between the two, I think the capabilities exist to go in and help rebuild these war-torn countries.
And you've seen this firsthand.
Yeah, let me add to what the general said, because he's so right. He referred to NGOs. That's non-governmental organizations. CARE is a non-governmental organization. USAID coordinates NGOs who are Americans who believe in peace around the world, who put their own lives at risk to go around the world and make life better. We're fighting the biggest all-time health war probably ever by the time it's over in terms of Ebola in West Africa. The people going to West Africa now, it's not just the 3,000 military troops going to help, but it's literally thousands of Americans volunteering, like Samaritan's Purse and others, the first two to come back to the United States. So you have two types of armies, the ones in uniforms with stripes and stars and weapons, and those Americans who go and volunteer to deliver goods and deliver peace and deliver welfare to people who've been living in war-torn communities but finally are emerging from those wars.
So we'll begin with audience questions to the Senator. Do you believe that better diplomatic relations with Iran will help us in our fight against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban?
Well, the enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend when it comes to Iran, and this, I'm going to express my own personal opinion, but the Iranians have not been a very honest broker since 1979 when they took Americans hostage in the embassy in Iran, kept them there for 454 days. We're the only hostages ever held by a foreign country that have never been recompensed for the time they were held in captivity. I don't think you can negotiate with somebody that you really can trust. I think we've got plenty of trust in the Middle East and Arab states that are coming forward, like the 5 partners we have today in the war against ISIS in Syria. Those types of trusted friends I think we can trust and believe in. But Iran has got to demonstrate first it's an honest broker before we bring Iran into the fold and treat them as a partner.
If I could add to that, from my personal time in Iraq dealing with Iran, their objectives in the region are diametrically opposed to ours. And so this is not a country that we can wrestle with. Through their support to the Shia militias, which they armed, trained, and supported, they're responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans and thousands of Iraqis. So before we take up a good conversation with the Iranians, I think we need to, as Senator Isaacson said, really consider the history and where this might go.
From the audience, a domestic question for Senator Isaacson. What's happened to the internationalist wing of the GOP? It looks like it's on the verge of extinction.
I don't think so. We got a lot of wings in the GOP. But it takes at least 2 wings for a bird to fly, so you're always going to have differences of opinion. 2 wings for an airplane to fly, too. Let me make that analogy as well. But, the only time, and of course I didn't go back to World War I, but I studied. I went back to World War. I go back to World War II, but I don't go back to World War I, but I studied it. The 2 greatest losses of life in the history of the United States of America were World War I and World War II. In both of those wars, we took the initial approach to be isolationist. When Hitler went into Poland, everybody said, well, he's probably not going to go any further. And we waited until it was too late. We actually waited until we were attacked in the second worst attack in history after 9/11, 2001, in terms of what happened in Hawaii. So I think I'm a part of the internationalist wing. I believe the world is a very small world that's getting smaller every day. I mean, this show, I'm sure, could be watched by ISIS right now today in the Middle East over the internet because it's being streamed, and the communication networks that we all have access to are just unbelievable. So I think it's important to look at the world in the big picture. We live in a great country that's rich. We're blessed. The Lord has treated us right, but we have an obligation to share it, not to possess it.
I'm curious, General, did your view on diplomacy as a large part of the solution evolve as you rose through the ranks?
Oh, it sure did. And, as I look back over time, I really became exposed to the impact of diplomacy and economic development as a brigadier general in Bosnia. And shortly after I got there in the summer of '96, The president's economic advisor for Bosnia came and gave us $5 million to start a fund. We called it the Commander's Emergency Response Program. But it was funds that commanders on the ground could use to do what Senator Isaacson pointed out earlier, basically to build support among the local community. And so I was made responsible for doing that, and I had to go and work with the head of the United States Agency for International Development in Sarajevo to put the parameters in place so we took good control of the government's money that we put into this. And I saw the power of that firsthand when right before the first elections that they had after the Dayton Treaty was signed, I went up to Brčko. Now, Brčko was a very divided area that had Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks. And those were the three factions. Well, when I called the meeting to tell the people how they could use this, get this access to these SERP funds, I had the Serb mayor, the Bosnian mayor, and the Croat mayor sitting directly across from me. And they're all concerned about economic development. And that really drove home to me the power of economic development as a tool in sustaining military operations. So I learned a lot there. I learned a heck of a lot more during my time in Iraq. And John Negroponte, the first ambassador, Zal Khalilzad, the second ambassador, and I worked closely together, and our motto was one team, one mission. That the military and the embassy had to work closely together if we were going to be successful as a country. And I think that's a very important motto to carry forward into the conflicts of the 21st century, because it's going to require one team, one mission for the country to be successful.
To follow up on that question from the audience, a fundamental element in fighting ISIS is forging a sustained coalition. Critical that we not try and do this on our own. Can this coalition be effective?
You know, that's a great question, and I'll give you this is my personal opinion. There are a lot of things you can talk about, and then there's sometimes you're better off not to talk about them. I think the media talking about are we going to put some boots on the ground or not is really a disservice to the American people, because if we have to put boots on the ground, I think everybody in here realizes we're going to have to put boots on the ground. In fact, you can't fight an air war without some boots on the ground already. Those planes flying at 30,000 feet through dark clouds at the middle of the night don't know where the targets are until they get the GPS coordinates from somebody on the ground, and it's obviously not ISIS. So I mean, I think I think our foreign policy needs to be as public and as transparent as possible, but you also have the element of surprise. We don't have, you know, our intelligence network is NASA, the National Security Agency, and all the people that we depend on in intel. Theirs is CNN and Fox. I mean, all they do, in the cafeterias and the mess halls in Iraq, when I would go to Iraq, what's on the wall? CNN's on one wall, Fox is on the other. Well, just because we're getting it doesn't mean the bad guys weren't getting it too. So everything we say in the media, becomes public knowledge in our enemy's camp. So there's some things left better unsaid, and there's sometimes I think the press ought to be more respectful when we don't give a definitive answer, especially when it comes to the security of our troops.
I think it was probably Napoleon that said the only thing worse than going to war with a coalition is going to war without a coalition. We're involved, I believe, we're involved in a long-term ideological struggle against global extremism. And it's not a struggle that we, the United States, can win by ourselves. It's a struggle that can only be won within Islam, when moderate Islamists triumph over the extremist Islamists. For us to work to pull together a coalition of Sunni Muslim countries against Sunni Muslim extremists is an absolute must if we're going to be successful over the long term here. And I am sure it wasn't easy.
To what extent does financial security of those people have to exist before we can have our influence?
Financial security of
just individuals within those countries.
Well, most of the Middle East, I'm going to get out of my league here a little bit, but my son wrote his master's thesis at Tulane based on the Dutch disease. The Dutch disease is when a country has infinite wealth because of a natural resource but doesn't reinvest in infrastructure. They just buy it. That's what's happened in the Middle East. They've had oil and petroleum just all over the place. They've made billions of dollars, and the sheiks and all the Arab leaders have they've come to the United States for their surgery. They've sent their children to the United States universities for their education, and there is no infrastructure in those countries to support them. And I think the general would back me up on that statement. What we've got to do is we win the hearts and minds of people in the Middle East who have been our enemies. We need to help them build the institutions that make all countries great. Health care, education, and protection. It's like in Afghanistan. A judicial code was non-existent in Afghanistan. The United States went into Afghanistan. They didn't have local judges. They didn't have a local code of law. They had the law of the jungle or the law of the West. So we have to help build those institutions so they stay sustained and they stay peaceful.
Question.
If I could follow up on that, I mean, I think the economic well-being of the people in developing countries in general is absolutely essential to long-term stability in the world. If you think about what's going on there and the explosion in information technology, this year we'll have over 3 billion people online, 3 billion. So about 40% of the population in the world is online. This year we will also go over 7 billion cell phone subscribers. Right? That's more people, it's more cell phones than there are people in the world. And I said this last night at dinner, 50 to 100 million of them don't even have electricity to charge their cell phones. But they're getting information 24/7. And they're not liking what they're seeing. And this ability to get information about what's going on in the rest of the world is creating a global awakening in expectations in these countries. And when they look out there, they see that the global distribution of wealth is significantly skewed. 45% of the population in the world controls 5% of the world's wealth. And they're the ones that subsist on less than $2.50 a day. That's significant. Those are the people that need to see improvement. We've got some demographic challenges in these developing countries. Because of the rapid population growth, you have these youth bulges. And so, for example, 60% of the population of the Middle East is under 25. That presents huge problems to governments that have to feed them, to educate them, to care for them, and to employ them. And there's all kinds of social studies that are out there that says when you have these countries with large populations of disaffected youth, they're much more subject to social unrest. And the extremists know that. And they're tapping into these populations and recruiting them for things like ISIS. So I would say economic prosperity is fundamental to long-term stability in the world.
Let me add, if I can, our window of opportunity for peace around the world and liberty for all the people of the world is running out. The Arab world is reproducing at a sustainability rate of about 6.7 children per marriage. The West is less than 2 now. So as we are shrinking in our size and not in a sustainable reproduction mode, the poorer countries are actually accelerating. So it ends up being a numbers game. I mean, it is about dollars, it is about power, but ultimately it's a numbers game. And the quicker we can help bring some type of peace and security and food and stability to poor countries, the less ISIS and people like that can recruit in those poor countries because the people no longer are fighting for just another day's bread. It's an important issue for our whole country.
You mentioned going and being involved in handing out microloans and the reaction that you would get essentially on the ground, on the front line, providing this positive force. How do you think we're viewed around the world? An almost impossibly general question, but as we invest in diplomacy and invest in things like microloans, do you think we're getting full credit for that?
Not necessarily from the leadership of the governments, but from the people who receive the aid and the benefit, absolutely. I've traveled to 19 countries in Africa. I've been to most of the countries in the Middle East. I've been in Afghanistan, and I've been in Iraq during times of conflict. And obviously, as an American, I've usually had my American flag button on my lapel or on my camos or whatever I've had on. I haven't had a negative incident yet in any foreign country in terms of response to my country or the fact that I'm an elected representative of the United States of America. So I think it's more appreciated than a lot of people in this room really believe. Quite frankly, in a lot of countries, it's not safe to express an appreciation or a love for the United States of America, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
A question, Senator, for you from the audience. The narrative of the U.S. government seems to be set on framing China as a U.S. competitor in Africa. How can we find common ground and work with China in Africa and other third world countries?
Well, in Africa, what China is doing, and Chris Sullivan, who's traveled with me to Africa, is in the audience here today. He's been there and seen it with me. You know, they build roads, they build stadiums, they build hospitals, but they build it with Chinese labor. They extract rare earth minerals and petroleum and other things that they take back to China. The people of Africa are a very intelligent, very compassionate people. They're a lot innately like Americans, I think. They appreciate the fact that President Bush started PEPFAR and President Obama has continued it, and no longer is AIDS the scourge as it was. It's still a scourge, but it's no longer the scourge that it was. We've turned the paradigm in Africa. We've got to keep working at it. We've got a long way to go, but we're doing it. Rotary International is ending tetanus in terms of the continent of Africa. We've eradicated, if Syria hadn't broken out, polio would be gone, but it's reemerged itself in Syria a little bit. What the Rotary Clubs of America have done in terms of the BedNet program and the malaria program in Africa, people appreciate that. So they appreciate what America, not just in its military, but its civic organization and its commitment, its faith-based commitment to the world to try and make life better for them.
I'll just come at it from not just a China particular perspective, but no other country in the world can bring to bear the kind of economic, moral, and military power as the United States of America. And people around the world recognize that. And that's why we have to continue to play a leadership role. We are the indispensable catalysts in bringing people together to act on problems facing the global community. And you just saw that played out right before our eyes here in this building of this coalition to deal with ISIS.
I have to believe this is a difficult job for you because you're trying to explain intellectually what you have experienced viscerally. If you were there and you could really see firsthand what good these dollars are doing, you'd be a passionate supporter.
You know, if that's why I told stories in my remarks, because I try and visually paint the picture that I've had the benefit of seeing. If anyone's been to Rwanda or been to the Coke water plant in Ghana or been to the New Abani orphanage in Kenya and seen firsthand the great passion and the great ability of the United States of America, our NGOs and our military, to make the life of people better, you don't have anybody who would oppose foreign assistance, domestic or foreign. So it's about us telling America's story to the American people themselves. Sometimes we forget. I know General Casey, the military has a problem sometimes. You have to get out in the community and tell your story. Tell them what you're all about and what you're trying to accomplish and the results of that for peace, for security, and for liberty around the world.
And it's not just the U.S. government. I mean, it's U.S. businesses. And I had the opportunity to go to Kenya and Tanzania with a local Atlanta businessman, Utar Kent. And I saw firsthand, I saw the water projects that Clyde talked about earlier. And I met women who were involved in their 5x20 program, empowering 5 million women entrepreneurs by 2020. And those are the kind of initiatives that are going to continue to bring economic prosperity and build a middle class.
Question, General, for you from the audience. Please relay General James Mattis's comments, which I believe are, if you don't fund the State Department fully, I need to buy more ammunition.
That sounds like a plan. So just to give you an idea how this transpired, we were actually on the Hill that day meeting with senators and congressmen. And the group that I was with happened to be meeting with several senators, one of whom was Senator Vitter, who stepped out of that hearing to come and talk to us. And it was the same week that sequestration had gone into effect and the Pentagon had just lost $50 billion out of their budget. And so my first comment to the senators was, I know it might seem incongruous to you to have a general up here arguing for the foreign aid budget where we just lost $50 billion out of defense, but it's that important. And Senator Vitter then left and went back to the hearing and asked the question and got that response from General Mattis. And I think it just reinforces what I said about our direct experience in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's why there are so many military people who are involved saying we have to support the foreign aid budget. Because if we don't, as General Mattis famously said, we'll have to buy more bullets.
It's a question for both of you. We talked a moment ago about the number of women entrepreneurs and funding and supporting women entrepreneurs around the world. So the question from the audience is, what's your strategy for making sure women are involved in peace building at high levels, not just the grassroots?
I say that last part again.
So how do you ensure that women are involved in peace building at high levels, not just in the grassroots? How do you get them into more responsible, influential leadership positions?
Well, you know, you build from the bottom. Leadership is always built from the bottom up. I have to give Helene Gale and CARE a big round of applause and a big point out right now on this. They've built a program, women's empowerment program in Tanzania and most of the countries in Africa. They developed a program called Village Savings and Loan, where the women are forming their own savings and loan associations. They're putting their own savings of pennies and sometimes a few dollars in a can or a strong box which they're provided with. They've got little passbooks like we used to have at R.L. Hope Elementary School 50 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia. I remember we'd deposit a quarter in our savings account. But they're teaching them the principles of capitalism. They make small loans to women who then go out and make products, whether it's shea butter, soap, or something like that, which is a real luxury in America, but the shea butter tree grows everywhere all over Africa. So if you build the women's strength at the bottom, at the entry level, they will grow and they will prosper. We have women CEOs and women presidents in Africa, not nearly the number that you have in America, but a lot more than you used to have because of things just exactly that what Helen Gale's doing. So don't try and look for a symbol at the top of success. You look for how big you're growing the bottom up, and that's when you really build the leaders of the future.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is helping countries change culturally, and that takes a long period of time. I mean, just from our experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, women are across the board in the armed forces, and they're out there operating in Afghan villages and used to be operating in Iraqi towns. And women saw them. Iraqi women saw them, Afghan women saw them. And they really became role models. And the more that we can demonstrate role models, people like Helene around the world, more women will, and when you combine that with the grassroots programs like the Coca-Cola 520 initiative, I think we're gradually going to see people's cultural views towards women shift over time. But it'll take decades. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
We've heard you say, well, go ahead.
I got to add one thing. I got to add a shout out to George Ingram. My first trip to Africa was with George, who was one of the earlier speakers. I went to Menya, Egypt, and I went to Awassa, Ethiopia, where I watched the Basic Education Coalition tell imams in Muslim schools, if you don't bring women into schools and give them equal education like you do the men, U.S. foreign aid is going somewhere else. I watched the revolutionary change in Egypt and what's taking place in Ethiopia, where women are now getting an education where before they were left inside their hut, not allowed to come out. That's the type of leadership that builds the foundation from which those leaders emerge. George, you did a great job on that. You made me a convert, George.
Senator, a direct question. We have a number of business leaders in the audience who understand that this is the diplomacy and the foreign aid that we give are the right things to do, but the question is, how does it come back to Georgia? How does it benefit us?
Well, there's a lot of mouths to drink Coca-Cola. There are a lot of bodies to put clothes on. There's a lot of people who want the intellectual property America has. You know, you were talking, George, about the cell phones, the countries that can't charge their cell phones, but they have cell phone access. It's the United States technology that puts stationary satellites over Africa where you have broadband downloaded from a satellite to the African village. They don't have electricity yet, but as long as their battery lasts, they can use their cell phone or their iPad. Those are the type of things that we can do to help a lot.
Got enough time for a couple more questions. This one from the audience regarding India. 600 million in India don't have toilets. How should the U.S. Response be to this type of problem, if any, recognizing their potential for growing economy and the impact on our economy?
Well, I think our responsibility is to set a good example, and quite frankly, the best way America sets that example, other than through our NGOs, is through our Peace Corps. I've traveled with the Peace Corps in Africa and actually in India to Agra, India, where we teach basic hygiene in villages. You know, India has basically two classes, those that have some wealth and those that don't, and there are a lot more of the ones that don't than do, and the ones that don't live in slums, a lot like Kibera and Kenya where I've been. But American leadership is not just strong leadership through military power and through village savings and loans and through things like that. It's teaching people how to dig a latrine and have basic hygiene. So the American leadership begins at the latrine and works its way up.
Can I quote that?
Yeah, you can quote me on that.
That's going to get tweeted in a moment.
If I could on the India question, the other side of that coin is that the middle class population in India is larger than the total population of the United States. So there are some positive things going there. And as I listened to that question, I asked myself, we need to know the limits of U.S. power. Going into another country and saying you got to fix your toilets. That's not something that's well received, as you can imagine. And so we have to know the limits of our power and know what we can do and can't do, and target those things where we can help have the greatest long-term impact.
Closing thought? Anything we haven't covered that you'd like to bring out?
There is, and I can't come to an organization like this without talking about the contributions of the men and women of the armed forces. I mean, we've been at war as a country, and it may not seem like that to you, for over 13 years. I mean, we're less than a month away from the 13th anniversary of September 11th. It's not a coincidence that we hadn't been attacked at home here until the Boston Marathon bombings a little over a year ago. It's because the men and women of our armed forces have carried the fight against Islamic extremism around the world. But it wasn't free. Over 6,000 men and women have given their lives, and they've left over 20,000 surviving family members. And I just met with the father, Robert Stokely, of Michael Stokely, who was killed in Iraq while I was there in 2005 this morning. But there's 20,000 others that are still out there. Over 50,000 men and women have been wounded. Some 10,000 of them are serious enough to require long-term care. Over 2 million men and women have served. Over 1 million have already left the service. A quarter of them are unemployed. We can do better than that as a country. And I just ask everyone to do everything they can to put these veterans back to work, because you hear a lot about problems that the veterans are having. If they have a job, all the other problems get a whole lot easier. So thank you very much.
Senator?
I'm a politician who knows when it's time to shut up, when everything's been said needs to be said, and what the General just said is exactly what I would say. Let me just say ditto, General. Thank you for your service.
Hi everyone, I'm Pamela Gregory, Southern Outreach Manager for the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and I want to take the opportunity to say another great big thank you to our wonderful panel, to Senator Isaacson, General Casey, and Richard Warner for moderating a great discussion. Thank you all. I also want to take the opportunity to thank our other speakers today. Steve Green, thank you for opening our program. Clyde Tuggle, thank you very much for your remarks. And Dr. Helene Gale, thank you. And I also want to say thank you to Reverend Madden of Peachtree Presbyterian Church for delivering a wonderful invocation and setting the tone for our event today. I also want to recognize our event partners, without whom we couldn't pull off such a wonderful event. So thank you to CARE, to the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. As our Executive Director, Liz Schreier, says, the difference between a good meeting and a great meeting is what happens next. So I want to encourage all of you to continue talking about the topics we discussed today. Find us on Facebook, tweet at us, connect with us. I believe you all have received an email from me already, but if you haven't, you'll be receiving something over the next couple of days recapping our event today. So respond to that. Let me know what you're interested in. Let us know how we can engage you. We want to continue this discussion, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much for coming out today, and have a great day.